The moment the lawyer slid the second envelope across the table, I noticed two things. First, the seal wasn't the firm's usual blue. It was crimson, pressed with what looked like Marilee's old signet ring, the one she claimed was just decorative, but always kept locked in her jewelry box. Second, her mother flinched when she saw it. Nobody speaks at first. The room, dressed in dark leather and polished oak, felt like it was holding its breath. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked once. Twice. My fingers twitched over the edge of the envelope, but I didn't move. I looked at Winona. Her eyes darted to her husband, Gregory, who was suddenly very interested in his wristwatch. Rigsby, the attorney, folded his hands. As per your wife's instructions, this is only to be opened if a claim is made by her family regarding her personal assets. Winona cleared her throat, straightening the hem of her navy blazer. We're not claiming. We're clarifying. The inheritance was always supposed to. That's a claim, I interrupted. My voice didn't sound like mine. It was colder, hollow. I didn't sleep the night before. I hadn't slept well since the barbecue, since the collapse, since the thunderclap that stole her life. I'd lived in a fog since the funeral. But right now, everything was sharp, razor sharp. I broke the seal. The paper inside was thick, textured. It felt like something out of a spy novel. The handwriting? Hers. Slanted, rushed, but still elegant. I read silently. Then I read it again. Then I looked up. I'm sorry, what is this? I asked, but no one answered. Rigsby tapped the table. You'll want to read it out loud, Clive. I swallowed. And I read. If you're hearing this, then my parents are doing exactly what I feared. If they are claiming the inheritance, tell them this. I moved the money. All of it. And no, Mom, before you ask, it's not in the Caymans. It's in a place only Clive knows. A place you all pretended didn't matter. I stopped. Gregory leaned forward, nostrils flaring. This is some kind of game. A last joke from your manipulative daughter. Rigsby didn't flinch. It's a legally binding amendment to her estate. But I wasn't listening anymore. Because suddenly, I knew exactly what she meant by a place only I know. And it terrified me. Not because it was hidden, but because I hadn't been there in 6 years. And because the last time we were there, she made a promise I never truly understood until now. I didn't say a word after reading the letter. Not to Winona, not to Gregory, not even to Mr. Rigsby. I simply stood up, placed the envelope in my coat pocket, and walked out of the office like I was sleepwalking through a dream someone else was directing. I heard Gregory call me unhinged, and Winona mutter something about getting the courts involved, but it all sounded underwater. I was already gone. It wasn't until I got to my car, our car, still smelling faintly of Marilee's lavender hand lotion, that the memory truly hit me. Her words had pulled a rusty drawer open in my brain. A drawer labeled New Haven, Vermont. A drawer I hadn't dared open since the spring of 2019. The cabin. She called it our ghost nest. I thought she was being romantic. But now, I wonder if she was being literal. We bought that place before we were even engaged. Tucked away near the edge of a dried-up lake, it was barely more than a one-room shack with no electricity, no plumbing, and too many spiders. I hated it, but she loved it, said it felt untouched by all the noise. We'd only visited a handful of times in our entire marriage, and after the last trip, after the argument, we never went back. I didn't bring it up again. Neither did she. And yet, that's where she sent me. That's where the money was. Or the truth. Or something. By the time I pulled into the overgrown driveway 6 hours later, the sun was already bleeding into the trees. The weeds had overtaken the steps. A fallen branch had shattered the porch railing. There were beer bottles scattered near the shed that I definitely didn't leave. My skin prickled. The air smelled wrong. Inside, everything was just as we left it, and that unsettled me even more. Our faded flannel blanket was still draped over the corner armchair. A deck of playing cards lay half-dealt on the table. Dust thick enough to write encoded the windowsills, but nothing looked disturbed. It was like the cabin had waited for us. Or maybe for me. I sat down at the table and opened the envelope again, rereading Marilee's words. It's in a place only Clive knows. I whispered the phrase like a riddle. She was always cryptic when she wanted to be poetic. Always left breadcrumbs instead of directions. And then I remembered. The floorboard. There was one loose plank in the corner of the room. We discovered it the second time we visited, during a thunderstorm that rattled the whole cabin. She had joked that we should hide something important in there one day. You know, she said, twirling a flashlight like a wand. In case we ever need a real secret. I got on my knees, my breath catching. The plank lifted with a groan. Inside, wrapped in layers of wax paper, was a small fireproof pouch. I pulled it out with shaking hands and unzipped it, expecting. Honestly, I don't know what I expected. Cash. A note? Proof of some twisted family betrayal. What I found was a USB drive. That's it. Just a single matte black flash drive. No label. No key. No explanation. I stared at it, my hands cold. I didn't bring a laptop. There was no internet, no signal. It would be at least an hour's drive to the nearest cafe. But before I could even decide whether to leave or stay the night, something outside crunched. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Coming from the direction of the shed. I froze. And then I heard a voice. Low. Male. Not one I recognized. Clive, it said. We need to talk about Marilee. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The voice outside didn't shout or demand. It just said my name like we'd met before, like I was expecting him. But I wasn't. And it didn't help that he sounded calm. Too calm. Still crouched over the open floorboard, I quietly slid the USB drive into my coat pocket and lowered the plank back into place. My heartbeat thudded in my ears like a drumline. The door creaked slightly in its frame as I rose to my feet. My first instinct was to call someone, anyone, but I didn't have cell service. No bars. Just me, an uninvited voice, and a cabin full of secrets. The footsteps moved closer, slow and unhurried. I could now see the shadow stretching through the dusty window, tall, broad shoulders, hands in his coat pockets like this was just another Sunday stroll. When he finally stepped onto the porch, I caught a glimpse of his face through the curtain slit. He was young, mid-30s, maybe. Strong jaw, weathered skin, but no menace in his eyes. Just something off. A kind of practiced stillness, like someone trained not to panic even when everyone else was running. I opened the door a few inches, but kept the chain lock engaged. Who are you? I asked. He raised one hand in peace. Name's Royce. That means nothing to me. He nodded, like he expected that. I knew your wife. The words landed like a punch. But it wasn't the content. It was the confidence in how he said it. No hesitation. No past tense slip-up. He wasn't guessing. He wasn't bluffing. He knew her. My fingers curled around the edge of the doorframe. What do you want? To explain what she didn't, he said softly. She told me, if anything ever happened to her, you'd come here. You'd find the drive. And eventually, you'd find me. I stared. You're saying she planned this? He tilted his head. She didn't plan to die, but she knew something might happen. Something involving her family. Or you. Or both. Why would she trust you over me? He hesitated then, just for a split second. Because I helped her disappear once. The silence between us thickened. I closed the door, undid the chain, and opened it again, fully this time. You've got 5 minutes, I said, stepping aside. Then I'm driving straight to the sheriff's station. Royce walked in like he'd been here before. His eyes scanned the place with too much familiarity. That unsettled me even more. He sat on the same armchair where Marilee used to curl up and sketch. I remained standing, hands stuffed in my coat pockets, gripping the USB like it might vanish if I let go. Royce looked at me. She told you about her parents, right? About how controlling they were. I nodded slowly. She mentioned some things. Religious cult tendencies. Money obsessions. Blackmail. The usual. Royce smiled faintly. Not just obsession. Ownership. Her father once made her sign a purity contract at 19. Legally binding. Tried to have it upheld when she moved out at 22. They had her tracked. Watched. My mouth went dry. I remembered how Marilee used to joke that her family was a Netflix documentary waiting to happen. But I never thought it went this deep. She vanished in 2015 for 4 months, Royce continued. Claimed she was traveling Europe to anyone who asked. Truth is, she was hiding out here. With me. I helped her disappear. Changed her ID. Opened offshore accounts. She was preparing for war. I was dizzy. Why would she need you to do all that? He leaned forward. Because she was planning to fake her own death. I nearly laughed. She's actually dead. I know, Royce said gently. I saw the death certificate. But that's the thing, Clive. There are 2 of them. 2 different dates. One from the hospital. One from her family's estate lawyer. What the hell are you talking about? Royce stood now, hands out, slow and careful. Your wife was playing a long game. And it wasn't about the money. Not exactly. It was about justice. Revenge, maybe. But the truth? She didn't want you caught in the crossfire. I stared at him. Too late for that. Not if you listen, he said. That drive in your pocket? It's not just files or account numbers. It's proof of things you won't believe yet. And once you open it, once you see what she was hiding, nothing in your life will make sense the same way again. He walked to the door, paused, and turned back. She loved you, Clive. But she didn't trust anyone, not completely. So, the choice is yours. Go home. Forget this ever happened. Or follow where she left off. And with that, he vanished into the trees like a ghost I never invited in. By the time I made it back to town, it was after midnight. I hadn't eaten in almost 12 hours, but my stomach was knotted so tightly it didn't matter. Royce's words looped through my brain like static. She was preparing for war. 2 death certificates. The drive isn't just about money. I didn't know what was worse. The idea that Marilee had been planning some secret rebellion behind my back, or the fact that she apparently didn't trust me enough to tell me. I checked into a rundown motel on the edge of a gas station, the kind of place that still used brass keys and had water-stained ceilings. But they had Wi-Fi and a working outlet. That was all I needed. I sat at the chipped desk and plugged the USB into my laptop, half expecting it to be empty. Or encrypted. Or maybe just full of corny love letters addressed to some other man. But what popped up was something else entirely. A single folder titled Gray Orchard. I clicked. Inside were 15 files, videos, PDFs, and a few scanned handwritten documents. My cursor hovered over the first file, a video labeled orchard_cam_footage_1996. MOV. I hit play. The screen flickered, then stabilized into grainy black and white footage of a girl. Young, maybe 16, running through a snowy field. The timestamp in the corner said February 4th, 1996. She was barefoot, wearing only a hospital gown. Behind her, a man in a parka chased after her, stumbling, shouting something I couldn't make out. The video cut off abruptly after 20 seconds. I sat there frozen. The next video, orchard_interview_1, MP4-inch, showed a much older version of that same girl, now clearly an adult, sitting in what looked like an anonymous shelter room. Her face was gaunt, eyes sunken, hair pulled back in a loose braid. She looked straight at the camera and said, "My name is Cora Amston. I was missing for 17 years. But I was never lost. I was hidden." Amston. I paused the video and just stared at the screen. My mouth had gone completely dry. The Amstons. Marilee's family. Her sister? A cousin? I had never heard that name before. Not once. Not in all the years of awkward Thanksgivings or ice-cold phone calls. And yet here she was, on video, speaking like she'd just clawed her way out of hell. The next document was a hospital intake form, St. Winton Behavioral Institute, Vermont. Patient, Cora Jane Amston. Date admitted, August 13th, 1995. Admitting reason, acute psychotic episode. Notes scribbled in the margins read, paranoia, religious hallucinations, and something that made my skin crawl. Family insists continued treatment is essential to preserve legacy. Preserve legacy. There it was again. That same cold, clinical obsession with image and bloodline that Marilee used to joke about. How her parents would always say, Amstons don't air their laundry. We burn it. I clicked through more files, each more disturbing than the last. Legal letters between the Amston family and a now-defunct psychiatric facility. A scanned photo of a bruised wrist. A handwritten page that simply read, in shaky capital letters, "They keep them in the basement during service." I felt sick. And the worst part? There were still 6 files left to open. But it was the last one, the only one labeled with a personal name, that I couldn't take my eyes off, _Clive. MOV. My heart slammed into my ribs. I hovered my cursor over it, terrified of what I'd hear. I clicked. Marilee appeared on screen. Not made up. Not posed. Just real. She was sitting on the cabin's front steps, wrapped in that faded blanket she always brought up here. Her eyes looked tired, but not defeated. There was something in them I hadn't seen in years, clarity. "If you're seeing this," she began, "then you found the drive. You found Royce. Or he found you. Either way, it means I'm gone, and I didn't get the chance to tell you the truth while I was alive." She looked away for a moment, then back into the camera. "You weren't supposed to be part of this. I never wanted you to be. But you married into a lie, Clive. A family built on secrets and sacrifice. And I can't let them keep getting away with it. The money is real. But it's not just for us. It's blood money. It belongs to her. To Cora. To the others. You'll understand soon. Just be careful. My parents won't stop. Not even now. She paused, then forced a weak smile. I loved you. Even when I lied. Even when I was scared. I never stopped. The video ended. And all I could do was stare at the black screen. The next morning, I woke in a cold sweat, fully dressed on top of the motel bed, laptop still open, the screen long faded to black. For a brief moment, I thought maybe I'd dreamed it all. The videos, the files, the message from Marilee. But when I moved, I felt the sharp edge of the USB drive still tucked inside my jacket pocket. It was real. All of it. I hadn't just married into a broken family. I had unknowingly married into a legacy of shadows. And somehow, I was now the one holding the flashlight. The name Cora Amston burned in my brain. I needed to find her. Not just to understand what happened, but to confirm that all of this wasn't some elaborate performance. A trap. Or worse, an inheritance of madness passed down from Marilee to me. I needed a second set of eyes. Someone who'd lived the nightmare from the inside. Tracking her down was easier than it should have been. A quick dive into public records, connected through a few of the addresses listed in Marilee's files, led me to a halfway house in northern Massachusetts. It was buried behind a shuttered textile mill, a three-story Victorian that leaned slightly to the left, like the weight of its stories had bent the frame over time. No sign, no doorbell, just a buzzer and a narrow slot for ID. I gave the name. The man behind the glass narrowed his eyes. She doesn't talk to visitors. Tell her Marilee sent me, I said. 5 minutes passed in silence. I almost turned away when the door buzzed open. She was thinner than in the video. Fragile, even. But there was a fire in her eyes that hadn't dimmed in decades. I expected wariness, maybe even hostility. Instead, she said something that stopped me cold. You're the husband. Not a question. A statement. Like Marilee had already told her everything about me. We sat on a sun-warped bench in the backyard behind the house. There was an apple tree that had stopped blooming years ago, but the bees still circled it like it had secrets. Cora lit a cigarette with shaking fingers, then offered me one. I declined. She said you were gentle, she began, exhaling a thin line of smoke. Said that was rare in your family. I'm not an Amston. No, she said. But you married into the blood. I wanted to ask 100 questions at once. About the videos, the institutions, the gray orchard. But something told me to let her talk on her terms. And eventually, she did. I was the first, she said. First daughter. First to be selected. They always said the orchard needed watering. That's what they called it. Watering. She flicked ash to the ground. It meant confession, isolation, purification, locked rooms, cold showers, sleep deprivation. We were supposed to come out clean. I didn't realize I was clenching my fists until my nails bit into my palms. They kept us underground, she continued. Soundproofed basements below the chapel. Girls from all over. Mostly family. Some adopted in. One never came out. I don't even remember her name anymore. Just her humming. She used to hum lullabies in the dark. Her voice broke slightly, and she went quiet for a long stretch. I tried to burn my way out, she said finally, rolling up her sleeve. The scar was old but unmistakable, melted skin along the wrist and forearm, the remnants of a desperate child who thought fire was more merciful than her family. I escaped during a storm, slipped out during a sermon while everyone was screaming hallelujahs upstairs. I ran through snow barefoot and never looked back. I swallowed the bile rising in my throat. Why didn't anyone stop them? Call the police? The FBI? Cora laughed, bitter and sharp. Because the Amstons owned half the board. Police, judges, doctors. Every time someone asked questions, they'd flash a check or a threat. That's how this works. You don't kill the monster. You feed it until it dies of its own sickness. She flicked the cigarette into the dirt and stood. So now what? I asked. Cora looked at me. Now you decide if you're brave enough to finish what she started. Marilee wasn't just collecting evidence. She was building a fuse. You might be the spark. I don't know what I'm doing. Neither did she. But she did it anyway. She turned to walk back inside, but paused at the door. One more thing, she said, not facing me. Your wife? She didn't die naturally. You know that, right? I stood there in stunned silence, but she didn't explain. She just walked back into the house and left the door open behind her. I drove home from the halfway house with Cora's final words sitting like a stone in my gut. Your wife didn't die naturally. The idea should have sounded ridiculous. Absurd. Offensive, even. But instead, it settled into my brain like it had always belonged there. Like I'd already suspected it, deep down, but was too afraid to say it out loud. The aneurysm that killed her had come on so suddenly, so cleanly, it barely left a trace. There was no build-up, no symptoms. She just collapsed. Done. One moment laughing about the grill. The next, crumpled in my arms, bleeding into the ground. The doctors told me it was rare, but not unheard of. Now I wondered how rare. Now I wondered what the coroner hadn't looked for, or what they had been told not to see. It was almost dawn by the time I got home. My hands were shaking as I unlocked the front door. The house was cold. Still. That eerie kind of stillness you only notice after something's been disturbed. At first, I thought I was imagining it. That the lampshade tilted sideways was just an accident. That the faint muddy footprint in the hallway was mine from days earlier. That the scuff mark on the baseboard near the stairs had always been there. But I knew. Someone had been here. Someone was here. I moved slowly through the house, checking each room like I was walking through a museum of my own life, trying to remember where everything used to be. In the office, drawers had been opened, not rifled through, not trashed, just accessed, with surgical precision. Nothing stolen, nothing broken, but one thing was missing: the USB drive. It was no longer in my coat pocket where I had zipped it away after leaving the motel. I knew without a doubt I hadn't lost it. I had touched it with my fingers at least 3 times during the drive home, paranoid and hyper-aware. Someone had taken it, and I hadn't even noticed. I stumbled into the kitchen, pulse pounding in my ears, and that's when I saw the mirror. It wasn't there before. A rectangular mirror leaned against the far wall, where a family photo used to hang. The mirror had a symbol drawn on it in what looked like black grease pencil or ash. A circle. Inside it, a split triangle. Below that, a single downward-pointing arrow. I didn't recognize it. Not exactly, but I had seen it before. In one of the scanned PDFs on the USB, one of the psychiatric evaluations for Subject C, there was a doodle in the margins. A child's sketch. That same symbol. At the time I thought it was random. A distraction. But now it was in my kitchen, staring back at me. There was a note taped to the base of the mirror. Plain white paper. Typed. Not signed. The orchard remembers. I didn't sleep. I sat on the living room floor with the lights off, phone clutched in both hands, every creak of the house making me flinch. I knew what this was now. Not just a warning, but a statement. They had let me find the drive. Let me get just close enough to believe I was in control. And now they wanted me to understand. I wasn't. At dawn, I finally called Royce. He didn't answer at first, but 5 minutes later, he texted me a single address. No greeting. No explanation. I copied it into my GPS. It was 6 hours away, New Hampshire border, near a stretch of land called Sallow Ridge County. I didn't need to ask what was there. I already knew. It was the place Marilee had written about in her personal note. A place she never took me. A place she once told me belonged to the family, but no one dares say its name. Gray Orchard. I packed a bag with whatever I could grab. I didn't stop to think. I didn't even leave a note. I locked the house behind me, unsure if I'd ever return. As I pulled out of the driveway, I saw something that made my stomach drop even lower. Across the street, parked under a dead tree, was a white van. No logos. No plates. Just sitting there. Engine off. Windows fogged. I couldn't see anyone inside, but I felt them. Watching. Waiting. The road to Sallow Ridge wasn't on any GPS. The further I drove, the fewer signs I saw. The towns became little more than names on rusted markers, the gas stations converted barns, and the radio signal long gone. Royce had warned me in his text, no signal past Hemlock Line. Download your maps. I did. But even then, the path seemed to shift with every mile, like the trees themselves were rerouting me, trying to trap me in a place the world had chosen to forget. I reached the edge of the orchard just after dusk. And by orchard, I don't mean neat rows of apple trees or hayrides. This was a walled perimeter, 6 feet of stone crumbling under ivy and rot, surrounding what looked like a decayed religious retreat. A large white structure loomed in the center, old-fashioned clapboard and black shutters, with a steeple that had long since snapped and collapsed into the roof. There were no windows intact, just holes, gaping like sockets in a skull. To the left of the main building was a separate structure, smaller, squatter, with metal doors bolted shut by rusted chains. Beyond it, only forest, endless and silent. I parked the car behind a tangle of fallen limbs, half expecting the white van to pull in behind me. But no one came. The air was dead. Not quiet, dead. No birdsong. No insects. Just the occasional moan of wood shifting against itself in the wind. As I stepped toward the front steps of the main building, I saw the words etched above the doorway, barely visible in the peeling paint. And ye shall be cleansed. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of mildew, old paper, and something far more organic, something that made my throat clench. The floorboards creaked with every step, but I kept going. Royce had told me to meet him inside the chapel. I assumed he meant the main building. I found him in what looked like a repurposed sanctuary. The pews had been pushed to the edges, and a long table stood in the center covered in yellowed files, photographs, and open metal boxes. Royce didn't greet me. He just gestured to a chair. "You're not ready," he said, "but we're out of time." He handed me a file folder, thick, heavy, and marked in red ink with the initials C.J.A. Cora Jane Amsden. I whispered. "Patient. Witness. Whistleblower." She tried to expose it before. In 2006. No one listened. I opened the folder. Inside were photos, some scanned from Polaroids, some newer. They showed rooms. Cold rooms. Metal beds. Children, mostly girls, seated in rows with IVs hooked into their arms. One image showed a rusted water tank with wires running into it. Another, blurry but horrifying, showed a child curled in a concrete cell, staring at the camera with eyes hollow and red-rimmed. And there, in the corner of one photo, unmistakable even through the distortion, was the same symbol from my kitchen mirror. The circle, the triangle, the arrow. I looked at Royce. They were experimenting. He nodded. Obedience training. Memory control. Electrosalvation, they called it. Built off pseudoscience, old cult theology, and a lot of money. They called it the Orchard Protocol. You want to know why it's called Gray Orchard? I didn't answer. Because nothing grew here, he said. Not fruit. Not love. Only silence. He pulled another envelope from his jacket and handed it to me. Marilee's last act. Her insurance policy. She used her death to force the Amstons out of hiding. To trigger you. To bring the evidence here. I opened it. Inside were two things. A smaller flash drive and a notarized document titled Confession of Gregory Amston. My hands went numb as I scanned the lines. It detailed the system. The children taken. The payments made. The names of judges, pastors, and loyalists placed throughout the community to protect the operation. At the bottom, in careful cursive, was Gregory's signature, and Marilee's handwriting beside it. If this is being read, he is no longer alive. I looked at Royce. Is he dead? Yes, he said simply. Cardiac event last week. Probably not natural. Her mother's still out there, though, and she's worse. Lightning cracked in the distance. The building groaned. We have to release this, I said. That's why you're here, Royce replied. But you need to understand what comes next. These people don't just sue or threaten. They erase. I closed the file, heart pounding. Then let them come. I'm done hiding. We stepped outside. The rain had started falling, cold and light. I looked back at the building one last time, and I noticed something I hadn't before. Carved into the bark of the dead tree near the entrance, almost invisible in the fading light, was my name. Clive. Below it, freshly scratched a date. Tomorrow's. I didn't sleep that night. Not in the car, not in the decrepit motel Royce had flagged for me just outside Sallow Ridge. My eyes refused to close. My thoughts wouldn't line up. The moment I saw my name carved into that tree, I knew the game had changed. They weren't trying to scare me anymore. They were trying to tell me I didn't have a future. At least, not one they would allow. But what they didn't understand was that I wasn't that quiet man anymore. I wasn't the husband who did the dishes and folded her sweaters and kept his head down at family dinners while her mother made sharp comments about my posture, my paychecks, my jeans. I had become something else. I had become the echo of the woman they tried to silence. By noon the next day, I was in Boston. Royce helped set up the meeting with a contact from a nonprofit press outlet. One of those rare, fearless watchdogs still run out of donated apartments and fueled by bad coffee and personal vendettas. We didn't go to the police. We didn't go to any court that had ever once accepted Amston money. We went to the people with nothing left to lose. I brought everything. The confession, the videos, the photos, the flash drives, Cora's statement, recorded on my phone. I laid it all out like evidence in a trial and told the story from the beginning. I didn't cry. I didn't flinch. I told the truth the way Marilee would have wanted it. Ugly, unfiltered, and irrefutable. Within 48 hours, the first article went live. The headline hit like a hammer. The Gray Orchard, inside the secret re-education cult hiding in rural Vermont. It went viral. National networks picked it up. Investigators reopened files long thought buried. 2 retired judges were subpoenaed within the week. A senator's name was mentioned in passing, and his press secretary resigned before noon the next day. The Amston family, what remained of it, issued a tight-lipped denial, but it was too late. The story had grown teeth. And finally, so had I. The most surreal moment came when I got a call from the mother of one of the missing girls. She'd read the article and saw her daughter's face in one of the old photos. They had buried an empty coffin 15 years ago. Now, she had something more than grief. She had truth. That phone call broke me in a way nothing else had. Not even Marilee's death. Because for once, I wasn't grieving alone. Cora agreed to do a filmed interview. Her face was pixelated. Her voice distorted. But she told everything. And when they asked her why she finally came forward now, after all these years, she said, "Because someone's husband reminded me that love isn't weakness. It's resistance." And me? I didn't disappear. I didn't run. I stayed. I testified. I watched the walls fall down, one headline, one whistleblower, one terrified but brave survivor at a time. It didn't all happen fast. Some names vanished quietly. Some threats still came in the mail, typed in all caps. But the orchard would never open again. The earth had turned, and the tree that once stood at its entrance, the one with my name etched into the bark, it's gone now, bulldozed like the rest of that cursed land. In its place, a garden, a real one, with tulips and lavender and one crooked bench where people come and leave flowers for girls they never knew. A plaque reads, "For the voices they couldn't silence." I visit every year. On the anniversary of the day Marilee died, I bring her favorite white lilies. I sit on that bench. I close my eyes. I listen. And in the silence, I hear her laugh.